Hey everyone, ready for a big one today? We're diving into the entire story of the Bible.
Whoa, ambitious.
That's why you're here. You sent over this YouTube video, tries to sum it all up, and, well, we need an expert to unpack it all. What do you think? Millennia of history, spirituality, a lot to cover.
It's going to be a wild ride, that's for sure. Especially because, it's just one perspective on a pretty complex text.
For sure. So where does this video even start? What's the jumping off point for this whole epic narrative?
Well, it starts at a place I found super interesting, not with creation itself, but with what existed before the beginning.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
Right. It emphasizes that God always was eternally existing, no origin. And it says that's crucial for understanding everything that comes after.
So setting the stage right away. It's not just a story about what was created, but who did the creating.
Exactly. And then, boom, Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve. But here's the thing. It's not just about their fall from grace. It really focuses on their original perfection.
Ah, so the fall hits harder. We see what they lost.
Exactly. And after the fall, it gets even more specific. It highlights the lineage of Seth, one of Adam and Eve's sons.
Seth. Interesting. Why single him out? Usually it's Cain and Abel, right? The whole brother versus brother drama. What's so special about Seth?
Well, the video suggests that his descendants represent this lineage that stayed true to God, even as the world around them was, going downhill.
So even in those early chapters, we see this theme, faithfulness versus disobedience. And that seems to be a theme throughout the Bible, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it continues right into the next big story, Noah and the flood. God's judgment on a world consumed by wickedness, saving Noah and his family. Consequences, a fresh start, all that.
And this is also where it connects Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, to the origins of different people groups, right?
Right. Representing, Semitic, African, Asian, and European peoples.
Right.
Trying to tie biblical history to the development of different cultures.
Ambitious. It really makes you wonder about those early chapters, how literally we're supposed to take them.
That's a good question. Now, shifting gears a bit, we get to Abraham. This is where the video really emphasizes God's covenant with Abraham, promising him tons of descendants, this unique relationship, chosen people, all that.
Okay, time for a quick refresher. What is a covenant exactly? Sounds like a big deal.
More than just a promise, it's this binding sacred agreement. It's God saying, I'll be your God, your descendants will be my people. The bedrock of the relationship between God and the Israelites.
Gotcha. Establishing a chosen people, a nation with a purpose. But knowing the Bible, I'm guessing it's not exactly smooth sailing from there for Abraham, right?
Nope, not at all. The video focuses on Abraham's faith, especially during the long wait for his son, Isaac, the son of promise.
Yeah.
Huge theme there, faith, even when things seem impossible.
Yeah, it's one thing to believe, but to hold on to that belief when years go by, nothing's happening, that's the next level faith.
Totally. And then, with Isaac, we see the start of a nation. But the story doesn't stop there. It passes down to Jacob, who gets renamed Israel. And Jacob has 12 sons. And their stories. Oh boy, get ready for some drama. Like soap opera levels of drama.
Oh, I know what you mean. Family feuds, jealousy, betrayals, the good stuff. And those sons, they become the patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Right, that's right. And things don't get any less dramatic for them. The video talks about their journey, how they end up in Egypt, years of enslavement, and then the escape, led by Moses, the Exodus.
Now that's a story. The plagues, the Red Sea splitting, epic. But even after that, their journey wasn't over, right?
Definitely not. They reach the Promised Land, and Moses sends 12 spies to check it out. And this is where the video focuses on the reports they bring back. And, well, let's just say they're not all singing the same tune. Some are terrified.
Yeah, I bet. Facing down those giants' walled cities.
Exactly. Convinced they can't possibly win. But others, they're full of faith, certain God will give them victory.
What a moment. That much pressure, knowing the fate of your people, rests on your report.
And the video really highlights what happens next. Fear wins out, doubt spreads, and it leads them to wander in the wilderness for, get this, 40 years because of their lack of faith.
40 years. Wow, talk about a timeout. It really shows you, even after all those miracles, human nature is still, well, human.
Right. And eventually a new generation comes along, one that's finally ready to enter the Promised Land. And that's where Joshua steps in, Moses' successor.
Okay, so Joshua, what's the video's take on him?
He's like this courageous, decisive leader, appointed by God to lead the conquest.
Sounds almost like a military general.
In a way, yeah. But even though they do eventually succeed, it's still not easy. The video talks about a period after the conquest, a period of the judges. a time of instability.
Oh, right, the judges. It's like every other Bible story I heard growing up was about some judge. Deborah, Gideon, Samson, weren't those all judges?
Yep. And the video uses their stories to show different things: leadership, faith, the consequences of both good and bad choices.
And they weren't perfect, were they? Those judges. They had flaws, made mistakes.
Definitely not. They were human, just like us, facing tough situations, trying to figure things out as they went.
Makes you feel a little better about your own life choices, right?
Maybe. Haha. Anyway, we move on to the era of kings. Saul, David, Solomon. This is where things get, well,
Epic.
exactly.
Yeah.
Powerful kings, grand palaces, huge battles, Israel at its peak.
David and Goliath, right. That whole story. Talk about a classic.
Total classic. And the video really plays up the successes of these early kings, especially David and Solomon. David builds this powerful kingdom. Solomon, known for his wisdom, builds the incredible temple in Jerusalem.
But it's not all sunshine and roses, is it? I mean, it wouldn't be a very interesting story if everything went perfectly.
True that. The video also emphasizes that these kings, they weren't immune to messing up. They faced consequences just like everyone else.
Especially Solomon, if I remember right. All those wives, the foreign influences.
Exactly. The video says those relationships led him away from God. It's like a cautionary tale about power, wealth, and the dangers of straying from your faith, even when you're supposed to be the wisest guy around.
And of course, after Solomon, the kingdom splits. Israel in the north, Judah in the south.
Right, right. And it's not just a political division. It represents this deeper split, this turning away from God, especially in the north.
So now we have two kingdoms heading in different directions. What's the overall vibe during this period?
Pretty turbulent. The kings of Israel, they're mostly portrayed as wicked, caught up in all sorts of idolatry. Judah, a bit better, some righteous kings trying to set things straight. But overall, it's a messy time. Political instability, social unrest, you name it.
Sounds like the kind of time when you need like a really strong voice to shake things up a bit.
And that's where the prophets come in.
Ah, the prophets. Now things are about to get interesting.
You said it. This is when we meet those big names. Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah. Bold figures, challenging both kings and common people to turn back to God, delivering messages of warning and hope.
They must have taken some serious guts to stand up to those kings, knowing what could happen. But even with those warnings, both Israel and Judah eventually faced the music, right?
Yeah. The video doesn't sugarcoat it. The northern kingdom falls to the Assyrians, and then later, the southern kingdom, Judah, gets conquered by the Babylonians. It's brutal destruction, exile, God's judgment.
Exile. So they're forced out of their own land.
The whole deal. And you can imagine how devastating that must have been, to be ripped away from your home, your land, everything you know.
Talk about loss of identity. Your connection to the land, your history, your faith, it's all tied to that place. To have it ripped away.
Exactly. But even in exile, that message of hope, it doesn't disappear. The video makes a point of showing that. The prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, they keep speaking God's word, offering comfort, reminding people that God hasn't abandoned them. And they even start predicting a future return, a restoration.
Wow, so even in their darkest hour, they're clinging to this belief that things can get better, that they'll return home someday.
That's the thing about faith, right? Even when everything seems lost, there's that glimmer of hope.
And those prophecies of restoration, they actually happen.
They do. The Persians conquer Babylon. Yeah. And the exiled Jews are allowed to go back to Jerusalem, rebuild the temple. It's a huge moment, a physical and spiritual homecoming.
After all that, to finally return to their roots, rebuild their lives, what a victory.
It was huge, no doubt. But, and there's always a but in the Bible, right? It wasn't easy. They faced opposition, people who resented their return. And they had their own internal struggles, too. Rebuilding isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's about rebuilding a nation, an identity, a relationship with God.
It makes you think about those echoes of exile, how trauma, displacement, those things can linger even when you're back home. Healing takes time.
For sure. And that's something the video acknowledges. But it also points out something else. There's this gap, this often overlooked period of about 400 years between the Old and New Testaments, a time the video calls prophetic silence.
Prophetic silence? What does that even mean? Did God go on mute for 400 years?
Not quite. It's not that there are no prophets, just no new prophetic books written during that time. It's like the world was catching its breath. A lot was changing politically, culturally, setting the stage, the Roman conquest, the rule of King Herod. And
Right.
ultimately,
Arrival of Jesus. Here we go.
exactly.
And what's fascinating to me is how this video portrays that arrival. It's like after all this history, all this buildup, the anticipation is palpable.
Yeah, for centuries, prophets have been saying, he's coming, the Messiah.
Mm.
And here it is, Israel under Roman rule, the timing feels intentional. Like the world was ready for this moment,
Primed and ready for a baby in a manger.
Talk about a plot twist. How does the video handle that? Because you think a conquering king, a warrior, would be more the expectation. It really leans into that contrast, the humility of it all. We still get the nativity story, the shepherds, the angels, but it connects those elements to this idea of subversion, like God flipping the script.
So right from the start, we're shown what kind of Messiah Jesus won't be. Not about power, not about earthly kingdoms.
Exactly. And as Jesus grows up, the video focuses on how he challenges the status quo, the religious leaders, the political powers, even just the way people saw the world. Yeah. He's shaking things up at every turn.
The teachings, the miracles, healing the sick, welcoming outcasts. Definitely not your typical Messiah behavior, at least by the standards of the day.
And that's the point. He's proclaiming a different kind of kingdom altogether, one that doesn't play by the same rules.
A kingdom of radical love, compassion, forgiveness. Pretty revolutionary stuff, especially back then.
Definitely turned some heads, that's for sure. But of course, it all leads to the cross.
Yeah, that's the part where a lot of people, even today, struggle to reconcile. How does the video handle such a difficult, well, frankly, brutal event?
It doesn't shy away from the tragedy of it, the injustice, the suffering, the apparent defeat. It's all there. But it also frames it as this ultimate act of love, a sacrifice that fulfills those Old Testament prophecies and makes redemption possible.
And then, of course, resurrection.
The cornerstone of the whole Christian faith. And yeah, the video doesn't downplay that. It's the victory over death, over sin, proof that Jesus was who he said he was, the foundation for that hope of eternal life.
And from that resurrection, we get the early church, a handful of grieving followers, suddenly energized, emboldened, ready to spread this message that must have sounded utterly insane to anyone who hadn't witnessed the events firsthand.
It's incredible, isn't it, the speed at which this movement spreads.
Yeah.
And the video really emphasizes the persecution they faced. And we're talking about risking their lives to share this message, traveling to new lands, building communities,
Yeah.
all because of their belief in a resurrected Christ.
Talk about putting your faith on the line. No marketing budget, no social media influencers, just raw conviction and a powerful story to tell.
It's a testament to how deeply this experience must have affected them. And the video ends by pointing out the legacy of that experience, the writings, the letters from Paul, Peter, James, John, the foundation of so much of the New Testament.
So we've gone from this sweeping, epic creation, covenants, exile, return, to this incredibly personal story of a single life that changed everything, and then back out again to this expanding movement fueled by those who knew him, those whose lives he touched, and ultimately those whose lives were touched by the stories they told. It's quite the journey, even when you condense it down like this video does.
It really highlights the power of narrative, doesn't it? How these stories, passed down through generations, have shaped cultures, inspired movements, challenged worldviews.
And it reminds us that this is just one interpretation, one way of looking at this vast, complex text. If you found anything we've talked about today even remotely interesting, I urge you to go explore it for yourself. Read the Bible, check out different translations, find some commentaries, discuss it with friends, wrestle with the hard questions.
Because there are so many layers to unpack.
Exactly. And who knows? Maybe you'll be inspired to create the next great video summary of the Bible. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.